The warrior stepped onto the observation deck and immediately regretted it. The view alone could make a hardened soldier pause mid-stride. Swirling clouds of the gas giant below, streaked with streaks of electric blue lightning, illuminated the station in bursts of color that flickered across his armor. He had seen a lot in his life: planets that bled magma rivers, moons that floated in eternal twilight. But there was something unsettling about this station, like it had a sense of humor the size of a nebula, and it was itching to play pranks on anyone who took themselves too seriously. He checked the holomap for the 100th time, making a show of scanning the corridors and docking bays, trying to convince himself that he wasn't distracted. He was disciplined, trained for situations like this, a warrior molded in the fires of endless conflict. But even the most ironclad training had cracks, and those cracks were starting to show the second he noticed her. She was there, leaning casually against the railing at the far end, arms crossed with that kind of grace that could make gravity rethink its loyalty. Her long ears curved delicately upward and back, twitching as if they could read his thoughts, or, at the very least, read the frequency of his panic. Her eyes, a shade of violet that didn't exist on any human color chart, met his for the briefest instant before she turned her attention back to the holographic screens hovering in front of her, fingers dancing over the controls in a way that suggested she had done this exact motion 1,000 times. He swore he wasn't staring, but the station's lighting, or maybe the laws of awkward physics, conspired against him. He tried to focus on the sensors in his hand, even muttering technical jargon to himself. Particle flux irregularity in Sector 7, anything to justify the way his gaze kept slipping back to her. The alien woman's ears flicked in amusement, a subtle signal that she noticed far more than she let on. "Warrior, why do you keep looking at my body? What's bothering you?" Her voice rang out, musical but edged with that precision that made you think she could cut steel with words if she wanted. She didn't shout, she didn't glare. She simply asked, and in her tone, it wasn't accusation but curiosity, a challenge that was somehow both disarming and unnerving. He nearly dropped his sensor pad. I was calibrating the He waved vaguely at the holograms as if they could vouch for his sanity. Yes, calibrating flux sensors, essential work, vital, really, for science. He swallowed hard, wishing gravity would grab him and pull him under the deck. Instead, she tilted her head, ears twitching like radar dishes tracking something mysterious. "You humans have such complicated excuses for simple things," she said, the faintest smile playing on her lips. She stepped closer, gliding effortlessly across the floor, her movement almost teasingly deliberate, a mockery of the warrior's flustered attempts at composure. "It's just eyes, they look, do not overcomplicate." He wanted to argue, but all he could manage was a strangled laugh that sounded like a dying engine. "Well, yes, but in zero-G, looking is hazardous. You could, float into trouble." His voice cracked in a way he didn't like. She chuckled softly, a sound that seemed to vibrate against the metal walls. Her ears flicked again, almost brushing the edge of a floating maintenance drone, which promptly spun in circles and beeped as if confused by her grace. "Floating into trouble, you say? Then you should watch where you aim, warrior. Eyes are weapons if poorly aimed." Her tone was playful, but her words carried weight, as if she was measuring his reactions in real time. He opened his mouth to respond, but she leaned casually on the railing, folding her hands together, and the world seemed to narrow to that mischievous tilt of her head. He tried humor, his only defense against social disaster. "Ah, yes. Eyes as weapons. Noted. I will calibrate accordingly, perhaps with a safety helmet." He tapped his own forehead for emphasis. She laughed outright, a sound that bounced around the observation deck like light caught in a prism. "Helmet, Very tactical, very human, I like it." She tilted her head again, ears flicking like antennae in the breeze. "But beware. Helmets cannot shield against curiosity, or honesty, or embarrassment." She punctuated each word with a small, almost imperceptible gesture, and he realized she was reading him like a sensor grid reading temperature fluctuations. He rubbed the back of his neck. "I'm trying to restrain impulses," he admitted, finally surrendering to honesty, the kind that soldiers aren't trained to give in the middle of a space station orbiting a tempestuous gas giant. "It's complicated. Protocols, discipline, respect. I know I should look away, but it's hard." She studied him for a long beat, long enough for him to feel like the gravity itself had paused. Then she smirked. "Complicated, yes, but unnecessary. Just be honest. Do not panic. It is not a duel, warrior. Eyes are not swords." Her ears twitched once, twice, and then she turned back to the screens, leaving him both relieved and even more off balance than before. He exhaled, noticing for the first time how tense he had been, shoulders rigid, hands gripping his sensor pad as if it could anchor him in place. He laughed quietly to himself, a sound part relief, part embarrassment. The station hummed around him, drones and personnel moving in predictable patterns, oblivious to the tiny, human-alien drama unfolding in their midst. Then, as if to test him further, she glanced over her shoulder. "You know," she said lightly, "it is funny. You try to restrain and yet you are entertaining. Perhaps we should schedule this practice more often." He blinked. "Practice?" She smiled, the kind of smile that promised mischief and challenge in equal measure. "Yes, practice. Learning restraint, observing honesty, watching your reactions. It is amusing." She twirled her hand and a floating panel drifted lazily toward her as if gravity itself agreed with her whimsy. He shook his head, trying to recover. I suppose I could practice." His voice betrayed the smallest crack of admiration, though he wasn't about to admit it out loud. Her ears flicked again and she leaned just a little closer. "Good. Warrior, but beware. This is only the beginning. Eyes will wander, minds will race, and discipline will falter, especially around curiosity." He laughed again, quieter this time, the sound merging with the hum of the station, the distant storm on the gas giant below, and the faint metallic chorus of 1,000 floating systems. Somehow, despite the awkward tension and the chaos of the orbiting station, he felt a spark of something like amusement, or maybe understanding. A fragile, electric connection bridging two very different species. And somewhere deep in his chest, a voice whispered that things were about to get much more complicated. The zero-gravity training chamber was alive in a way that made the warrior simultaneously uneasy and amused. Floating obstacles drifted lazily around the room, glowing panels projected shifting targets, and a faint hum of the station's energy grid thrummed through the walls like a contented alien purr. He tried to focus on his drills, practicing precise combat maneuvers he had repeated countless times on battlefields light years away. But every time he adjusted his stance or swung his training staff, he caught sight of her. She floated effortlessly above the main platform, arms crossed, long ears arcing behind her like delicate, sensitive instruments. One ear twitched at his every movement, the other flicked toward the floating panels as if calculating trajectories for fun. The warrior tried not to think about it, but the twitching ears seemed to have their own mischievous will, and he swore one had winked at him the moment he miscalculated a spin. "Careful, warrior," she called, her voice light but melodic. "Your form is questionable. Are you practicing combat or inventing new ways to flail spectacularly?" He landed awkwardly on a floating platform and nearly tipped off into the chamber's open shaft. "Spectacularly, definitely spectacularly. Very intentional." He waved his arms like a conductor of chaos. She laughed, a pure, ringing sound that ricocheted off the chamber walls, and he had to admit, it made him feel simultaneously embarrassed and strangely encouraged. "Intentional flailing is the hallmark of a competent soldier," she said, drifting closer, ears twitching. "Especially if you want to entertain your spectators." She tilted her head, violet eyes narrowing in mock evaluation, and he felt like a child being graded by a teacher who secretly enjoyed the absurdity of the lesson. He gritted his teeth and attempted a more disciplined sequence of spins and strikes, But zero gravity had a cruel sense of humor, and one miscalculated leap sent him spinning head over boots, narrowly missing a floating energy panel. She clapped softly, a playful, sarcastic applause, and quipped, "Bravo! I've seen asteroid storms behave with more predictability than your trajectories." He tried to respond with humor, flailing an arm at her in mock offense. "I'll have you know, asteroid storms have less style." Style? She arched an eyebrow, or as close as an alien iridorned head could achieve such expression. "Do you mean chaos, warrior? Because style implies choice. You are chaos. Very artistic chaos, I grant you, but chaos nonetheless." He groaned, spinning back toward the central platform and barely catching a handhold. "Artistic chaos. That's encouraging." She drifted down, floating close enough that he could see the subtle shimmer in her skin, the faint reflection of the chamber lights dancing across her violet eyes. "Encouraging. I meant it as praise. You humans are peculiar. But I find your peculiar methods amusing." "Amusing?" he echoed, voice flat, though he couldn't hide the twitch of a smile. "Great. I'll add that to the list of things to put on my resume." Her ears twitched like sentient measuring instruments. "Resume? For combat or for entertainment?" "Both," he said quickly. "I'm versatile." She laughed again, and the sound made his chest ache in a way that had nothing to do with exertion. "Versatile, yes, that will serve you well, but do not confuse entertainment with skill. One can entertain without accomplishing anything. One can accomplish without entertaining. You, warrior, you manage both, somehow." He raised an eyebrow, feeling a grudging respect growing for her insight. "You make it sound like a compliment and an insult at the same time." "Precisely," she said, floating closer and flicking her ears with deliberate mischief. "That is how all humans should learn lessons, with a mixture of humiliation and amusement, preferably balanced like a spinning moon in orbit." He nearly lost his grip on the platform. "Spinning moons, aliens, humiliation. Am I meant to take notes here?" "Only if you want to survive training with me," she said with a wink, or more accurately, an alien approximation of a wink. "Otherwise, you may float off into irrelevance." He snorted, "Irrelevance, dramatic but fair." She studied him for a moment, her violet eyes narrowing thoughtfully. "Tell me, warrior, you try to restrain yourself. I can sense it, but why? Fear of offense, fear of judgment, or fear of curiosity consuming you?" He hesitated, floating in zero gravity, heart racing faster than any training could demand. I suppose all of it. Respect, discipline, cultural protocols, and curiosity," he admitted reluctantly. "It's complicated. You're different, but I can't pretend I'm not aware of that difference." She tilted her head, studying him like a rare specimen. "Difference, yes, that is the correct word. Curiosity will always exist between beings of different worlds. It is natural, dangerous if uncontrolled, but inevitable. And yes, I can sense it. That is not necessarily bad. Sometimes honesty is more valuable than restraint." He laughed nervously. "Honesty, in zero gravity, honesty is hazardous." "Perhaps, but entertaining," she replied, ears twitching in amusement. "I have seen honesty disarm more effectively than weapons, though not as stylishly as your attempts at flailing." He groaned. "I'll take the honesty compliment and leave the style criticism to you." She floated closer, studying him as he struggled to keep his balance in the training chamber. "I like humans," she said suddenly, in a tone that made him nearly float backward in surprise. "Chaotic, prone to error, full of dramatic gestures, but strangely sincere. Do you know why that is amusing to me?" He shook his head. "I can only guess, because I have no idea what you're thinking." "Partially," she said, a smile tugging at her lips. "Partially because sincerity is rare in the galaxy. Most beings hide behind protocols or genetic pride or fear. You try, and for that you are fascinating. Don't overthink it, warrior, just exist. That is often enough." He blinked, floating in silence for a moment, letting her words sink in. Then he grinned, feeling something like relief. "Existence, got it. I can do that. Maybe even with style." Her ears flicked in mock consideration. Style is optional. Survival is mandatory. But if style accompanies survival, amusing consequences will follow. And in that moment, as the station hummed around them, the warrior realized that zero gravity, long ears, and awkward honesty could coexist in ways that were as dangerous as they were strangely comforting. Humor and chaos became tools, not just distractions, and the line between training and entertainment blurred into a delicate, floating dance. By the end of the session, he was exhausted but exhilarated. He had flailed, stumbled, nearly crashed into panels, and yet, through all of it, she had been there, teasing, testing, observing. And when she finally floated away, leaving him to his own chaotic thoughts, he couldn't help but laugh quietly at the absurdity of it all. For the first time in weeks, he felt like he wasn't just surviving the station. He was learning in ways far beyond combat. The alarm blared through the station, sharp and insistent, echoing down every corridor like a metallic scream. Red warning lights painted every surface in urgent streaks as the hum of the energy grid shifted into a low, threatening vibration. The warrior's boots barely clattered against the metal deck in zero gravity, and he felt the familiar adrenaline spike in a way that reminded him he wasn't just a soldier. He was a problem solver. And right now, the problem was catastrophic. A core energy reactor malfunction threatened to tear the station apart if not stabilized immediately. He rounded a corner and nearly collided with her. The alien woman was floating midair, her long ears streaming behind her like twin ribbons tracing every movement. She had a tool strapped to her wrist and a focused expression, but her violet eyes flicked to him, glinting with amusement even amid the chaos. "Warrior," she said, voice calm but crisp over the alarm. "If you panic, the station will not be the only thing destabilizing. Restraint is essential, yet amusingly difficult for you, I suspect." He gave her a crooked grin, running a hand over his hair, already frazzled from sprinting through zero-G corridors. "You know me too well, but I promise I'm keeping my panic to a manageable level. For you." She rolled her eyes, or at least the closest approximation to rolling eyes that long-eared anatomy allowed, and flicked a panel open. "Manageable, If your definition of manageable includes dramatic flailing and near collision with essential infrastructure, then yes, very manageable." He laughed despite the situation, which made her shake her head in disbelief. "You're impossible," he said, floating past her to the reactor access point. Sparks danced around exposed conduits, and the reactor core emitted a high-pitched hum that suggested impatience, as though it were fully aware of the gravity of the situation. "Impossible," she repeated. "I am highly capable. You, on the other hand, have style, chaotic, unpredictable, irritating style, but style nonetheless. Now stabilize the conduits before we become floating debris." He got to work, his fingers flying over control panels, reconnecting circuits and rerouting power flows with precision. She hovered nearby, calling out occasional guidance, correcting his miscalculations, and making small jokes about his dramatic gestures as he contorted his body to reach floating conduits. At one point, a floating tool hit him in the shoulder and she quipped, "Bravo, direct hit. I award 10 points for style and 3 points for unintentional slapstick." He swatted at it, laughing, the sound echoing off the chamber walls. "I am clearly winning at this then." She flicked an ear, smirking. "Winning at survival, yes. Winning at decorum, questionable, but we shall allow it. For amusement and effective reactor stabilization, you pass barely." They worked together in a rhythm that was both chaotic and precise. Sparks flew, energy conduits hummed, and the hum of the failing reactor threatened to drown out every thought. Yet amidst all that, the warrior felt something he hadn't in months: clarity. The alien woman's presence, once a source of tension and embarrassment, was now an anchor. Her humor, her teasing, her precise guidance, they allowed him to act decisively without overthinking, to balance restraint with instinct, to trust himself in her. Finally, with a final adjustment and a tense pause, the reactor core stabilized. the hum shifting into a steady, safe rhythm. The alarms ceased, and the red lights gave way to normal station illumination. The warrior slumped against a railing, breathing hard, sweat clinging to his brow. And for a moment the station felt eerily still, like a universe holding its breath in relief. The alien woman floated beside him, ears twitching, hands clasped lightly in front of her. "Congratulations, warrior. You did not explode spectacularly, or at least not today." He chuckled, exhausted but exhilarated. "I suppose I should thank you for the guidance, and for not letting me become a literal statistic." "Guidance is mutual," she said, a mischievous glint returning to her violet eyes. "You may be human, prone to error, dramatic gestures, and chaotic tendencies, but you listen, adapt, and sometimes surprise me. That is worth acknowledgement." He smiled, letting himself relax for the first time in weeks. "I've learned a lot, about restraint, about honesty, about curiosity, and maybe that some distractions are worth indulging." She laughed softly, a sound that seemed to shimmer in the quiet of the chamber. "Distractions, perhaps, but also opportunities. You see, warrior, the universe does not always reward rigidity. Sometimes it rewards engagement, attentiveness, and the ability to survive flailing spectacularly in zero gravity." He laughed at that, shaking his head. "Flailing spectacularly, I suppose I've earned a reputation for that." "You have," she agreed, ears flicking in amusement. "But now your reputation has evolved. You are no longer simply chaotic. You are disciplined chaos, capable of both entertainment and survival. That is rare." For the first time he noticed the subtle shift in himself, not in physical strength, but in confidence, clarity, and perspective. He had faced danger, worked with someone utterly unlike him, and discovered that honesty, humor, and adaptability could be as powerful as any weapon. He felt lighter somehow, as if the experience had peeled away layers of fear and uncertainty, leaving a clearer version of himself. "And what about you?" he asked after a pause, curiosity getting the better of him. "Do you learn anything from humans or just amuse yourself at our expense?" She tilted her head, ears twitching thoughtfully. "I learn perspective. Entertainment, certainly. Curiosity, yes, but perspective most importantly. Humans are messy, prone to error, but sincere in ways most species struggle to be. That is valuable and amusing." He laughed again, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the reactor or physical exertion. "I'll take that as a compliment." "You should," she said, drifting closer, eyes sparkling with that familiar blend of mischief and insight. "Now, warrior, let us leave the chamber. There are corridors to patrol, perhaps minor emergencies to avert, and more lessons to be had in subtle observation. But for now, you may float freely without fear of annihilation." He allowed himself a small bow, playful and dramatic, as he floated alongside her through the station corridors. "Freely, I'll try my best, though I make no promises about dramatic gestures." She laughed, the sound echoing down the metal halls, and flicked her ears in mock warning. "I shall tolerate dramatic gestures, provided they do not destabilize the station or my patience." He grinned, "Deal. But you'll have to endure the occasional chaotic spin." Her eyes glinted with amusement, and she said softly, "I suspect I shall. And perhaps, warrior, perhaps I will even enjoy it." As they moved together through the station, the warrior realized that the strange, chaotic, and humor-filled connection he shared with her was not just a distraction. It was growth, understanding, and mutual respect woven into an intricate dance of culture, curiosity, and unspoken attraction. He had arrived as a soldier trained for war, disciplined but rigid, and he left the chamber a warrior tempered by laughter, honesty, and the unpredictable beauty of the universe. For the first time in a long while, he felt ready for anything.